Since 1985, the Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless has strived to nurture and empower by providing shelter, food, and educational resources to families and individuals seeking basic needs. Julie spoke with Executive Director Sue Giovanetti.
I'm so pleased to welcome Sue Giovanetti, who's the CEO of the Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. There is a misconception, I think, about what homelessness means. As far as what you do at the Coalition for the Homeless in Plymouth, what is homelessness? How do you define that?
So certainly without stable housing is really, I guess, the simplest way to word it. We at the Plymouth Area Coalition care for families, strictly families, who find themselves homeless. They've been couch surfing, they've been evicted, they've had any number of things that have led to this situation, but they have no alternative, no stable housing that's possible. So through the Department of Housing and Community Development, we're able to, we have a contract with DHCD, and we offer housing. The families are placed by the state into the Pilgrim's Hope shelter.
Okay, into your so it's not like they walk off the street and just say, you know, we need a place to stay, or does that happen also?
So yes, it happens that people do call or arrive at the shelter looking for housing. We are not able to place them under those circumstances. We do, however, have the ability to provide them with some counseling and resources to get them into the pipeline to find
another place.
Emergency assistance housing or another form of shelter.
Right. Now, you just do families versus individuals.
That's correct.
Was that by choice? Is that why is that? Because I think most people don't think of entire families as being homeless. Whether it's an adult and one child or two adults and six children, you think of it's a homeless person. You see an individual that's homeless on a street. How did it arrive that it was families?
So when the coalition started, they in fact started in the early years. They had some different individual shelters around town. At one point, we had one for adolescents.
Yep.
We had a family shelter in Halifax. But the decision was made to really focus on, rather than being a mile wide, to really focus on family homelessness. And you're right, you're absolutely right. Families that are homeless often go unseen because they are couch surfing.
Right.
They are in their cars, unfortunately. They're in the campsites at the state forest. There are a lot of alternatives for a period of time until the weather gets cold or someone becomes ill. Or there's a lot of different extenuating circumstances, but our program is really a program where we focus 100% really on building up the families so that they become self-sustainable. Our job, first and foremost, is to find them housing that they can move forward with and sustain. But while we're doing that, we have an education program. We're making sure the children are enrolled in school and that the parents have the skills and the ability to care for them. That quite often families that are homeless haven't necessarily, they may have grown up within the system. They may not have had positive role models or even themselves experienced stable housing. That's not always the case, but it's quite often it can be. So we try very hard to provide the educational resources to help them build up those skills.
So when you think about this, it's not just the basics. It's not just a roof over their head and food to eat. It's so much more. It's getting them ready to find the next place that they can maybe find a forever home in. Correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I quite often I'll say we're in the business of providing hope.
Yeah.
Because, if a family arrives at shelter, they're at their lowest point. there can't be anything. I started work at the shelter, it was August 6th, and I think August 7th, a van pulled up, and a mom and 3 children came out of the van, and I think they had 2 backpacks. But I remember looking at them standing on the little walk in front of the shelter and thinking, I never saw anything so sad as the looks in their faces. So that family had faced incredible adversity that led them to that point. These children had seen and experienced a lot of sadness and upheaval, just not nice things. You wouldn't want anyone to go through it. So now they've left their neighborhood.
Right.
They've left the only home they knew. I think those kids were like 7, 5, and 2. Left their toys.
Right.
The ones that were in school, left their school friends, and now, and again, where the shelter is located, we're a little rural. Now they're out and basically in a wooded area.
Right.
And it's a nice place, but it's still totally alien to anything these children or the parents have seen.
And you have to take all of that into consideration when you are dealing with them, right from when they walk through your doors to how you plan their case management.
Yes.
To next steps. How complicated is this, especially when you have children that have to go to school and parents that have to maybe be placed in jobs or learn a new skill. At the same time, you're doing all the basic needs for them.
Right.
It's overwhelming. I can't even imagine that you're doing this for multiple families at the same time.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges you face knowing that you have to do all of that?
So each family has its own set of circumstances, right? But I would say most families, by the time they get to this point, are faced with a lot of emotional and mental illness challenges. And we all know today we're a lot more accepting and understanding of that, and that there are different levels of mental illness. But that's very difficult because we respect and want to assist them as much as we can and support them. So that's the biggest common denominator that runs through the population, seems to be that. So that's an immediate, I always say, just figure your first night in a shelter, now you're in congregate living, which by congregate living we're talking about shared bathrooms, shared kitchens, shared living space.
Yeah.
Each family has one unit, 2 sets of bunk beds, 2 sets of metal bunk beds, metal nightstand, metal bureau, and a lamp. They can arrive to shelter with no more than 2 kitchen trash bags a person, because the space is a commodity as well, right?
Sure.
So, so it now, again, I'll go back to the child, but it's the same for the adults. You go to bed at night, that first night, and lots of different noises.
Oh, yeah.
Metal bed, not especially warm and cozy, right? We certainly do everything we can to make sure that they have comforters and things that make it more of a home. But it's a lot to get used to. Now you're sharing a bathroom. We're in different wings, so each family would share a bathroom with 6 different families.
Sure.
So there's a lot of, there's no privacy.
No, right.
Yeah.
So in your efforts to try to give some semblance of normalcy, especially to the children, you have a lot of different things that you do, like you sent us some pictures, your living room space, you have murals on the wall, and you've designed the furniture to be cozy and for people to interact with each other. You sent a picture of a little girl with a teddy bear. Can you talk about the teddy bear program?
Right. So 6 years ago, one of our board members had a couple of children, and Layla and Hendrik. And she's the one that really got this program up off the ground. But what what we became very much aware of is that first night kind of feeling, where,
Sure.
yeah, much like the hospitals would give
Yeah.
children teddy bears. And this is so true, when you've got it doesn't matter if you're 16 or 6, if the first night in a new place, and the noises, the cold,
Sure.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Charlie the teddy bear is, we give it to every child. We don't, even if they're 18, we
Yep.
give them, they all get a teddy bear. And he has become iconic with the shelter. He really, and our hope is really to carry that program forward. I'm working on the funding for it, to create a situation where we can have a child psychologist on site a few times a month to kind of identify needs, and then channel those families to services. We're not looking necessarily to provide the service,
Right.
but we know that
You're
a
identifying. Yep.
lot of the kids could use some service, have that need identified.
Right. Now
Yeah.
you sent us another beautiful picture of 2 little kids that have a big cardboard box, and tell that story, because this is a heartbreaking picture.
Yeah. So we were very fortunate to receive some funding through the state, and we have the incredible support of our legislative team
Yes.
that we're grateful for.
Yeah.
So we were able to get some additional funding and purchase some new furniture. And when furniture comes, especially institutional furniture, it comes in very large boxes.
Cardboard boxes,
And
right.
our kids aren't unlike any child. You can have the best toy ever, but give them a cardboard box.
Yep, there
and
you
it's
go.
a great.
Yeah.
So when the furniture was delivered this past winter, I dropped this giant cardboard box into the living room, and I call them the Z team, this little boy and little girl, they brother and sister, immediately, their eyes lit up and everything, and they started to play with it, and they had crayons and things. Well, I came back maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours later, and they had actually made a house, and they had their mother cut windows into it, and
they furnished their little house.
they furnished their house. They had a tablet in there for a television. They had a little stool that we had in the living room for the kids. They had their Cheerios, a box of Cheerios in there, and they wanted me to come in, which obviously I couldn't fit. But so but I think the picture shows them. They were so proud standing. Oh, and they drew outside. They drew like around the windows and. So these children had never had a home. While they may have had like an apartment for a short time, but they never had a home, yet give them a box.
Yeah.
And what is the first thing they do? But they make a house.
Right.
And they couldn't wait to get inside,
Yeah.
and they wanted to entertain.
Right,
but,
sure, yeah.
But no, but it just spoke volumes about how essential and meaningful it is for all of us, whether we're 3 and 5 or
Right.
we're 35 or 55. It doesn't make a difference. Your home is a special place, and
a
yet
sanctuary.
these children knew just how special and important that was.
Right.
And I that's one of those pictures that always will recenter me and say, like, wow,
This is why I do this.
Yeah, it was really it's a special picture, but it was a very special moment when it happened, and have the conversation with the kids.
Right.
So.
Also for children, you have the Children's Holiday Fund. So Christmas must be or any holiday must be a very difficult time for kids who they don't have the traditional night before Christmas and reading the story and the cookies and the milk for Santa coming down the chimney, and they don't have that. So what do you do for them?
So at the shelter, I'll very often say to the staff things like, one of the things we need to do is create memories for our families, and certainly Christmas is no different. And actually, away from Christmas, we have a bunch of tooth losers right now. I think they're
Oh,
all like 7 years old or
tooth
whatever
fairies,
it is.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, it was the other day, we're like, oh, I guess the tooth fairy
Yeah.
has been visiting here quite a bit lately.
Yeah.
So, but Children's Holiday, yeah, absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, I would start off by saying nothing that we do at the coalition is possible without the community. We have tremendous community support. We covered 22 communities.
Yeah.
Certainly Kingston, Plymouth area are the heaviest
yep.
of services, but I can't say enough about the support that we get from the community, and that's Children's Holiday Fund has been over 35 years.
Yeah.
Just
And they get presents and all
grown
kinds
phenomenally.
of things. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
so Children's Holiday Fund, not only do we provide the gifts, but clothing, winter
Yep.
clothing. We make sure the family has a holiday meal. And we try, and we do children up to 18, which isn't like a lot of programs. Teenagers deserve that same excitement and
Yeah.
you know, the joy, that anticipation that the holidays bring, and all that happiness. So we do a lot of teenagers as well as
Yeah.
younger children. You know, certainly with COVID, that knocked out our Christmas parties and you know,
Sure.
all of those events, but we still try to do those kind of things. It actually worked out in a good way for our families, because what we found is, rather than people coming in from the community and having parties for the families, what we did was provide our families with the materials to have the parties, because you know, that's a skill.
Sure.
We don't think of it as a
Yeah.
skill, we think of it as what we do.
Right.
But if you've been homeless, you've never had the opportunity to do some of the, you know, to have these traditions.
Right.
So
Christmas
we
meal.
do,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
hanging out stockings, all of those little types of things. Through the food pantry, we provide them.
I was just going to ask you about
Yeah.
that. So the food pantry, is that just for the people that you house in your shelter?
No,
No.
we cover, we have food pantry clients from as far up as Hull down to Wareham, Halifax, Abington. Yeah, we have a lot of food pantry clients.
And you run this out of the same location?
Separate building,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
on Bishop's Highway, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we feed the food pantry. We feed. Right now, we're providing on a weekly basis between 100 and 150 families with food.
For 7 days?
Yeah. So again, that's another program that shifted due to COVID.
Right.
But during that time, the volume increased so much that we haven't gone back to our old format.
Right.
Where,
And I would think now, where the food is so expensive, that you're probably getting even more people taking advantage of that.
and what we find, and what we're really focusing on trying to get the message to are those individuals in the middle who are really experiencing rising gas prices,
Yeah.
loss of job, maybe just coming back after being furloughed. The middle seems to, they're not necessarily getting SNAP or TAFDC. You know, they're just hardworking people, and they need a little bit of
Little
extra
something.
support.
Yep.
And so we are very much trying to get the word out to those families that anybody can come to the food pantry. There's no income qualification.
Right.
You just come,
Yeah.
and we're happy to serve you. Today, we had the Rotary Club there for 2.5, 3 hours unpacking the Greater Boston Food Bank truck. Then we had a shipment, 2 pallets of chicken that came in. We have other people in there unloading that. We're gearing up because we're opened up. Our pantry is open Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. So yeah, but we're serving a large number of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, because there's so many different paths we can travel down. But what strikes me is, once you have a family and they've come through your system, let's call it,
Yeah.
and you've adjusted that system to whatever that family needed, and the family moves on, do you ever hear from that family again? Do you ever get to follow up and see what happened to them?
So we do stabilize families for 1 year after they leave shelter.
Oh, great.
So once we find, you identify housing that would be right for the family, and then hopefully it's a situation where we can work with them, and they would have home base that would help them get through 1 year of rent and expenses.
Yeah.
After 1 year, the expectation would be that they would
made
be
it.
able
Yep,
to
they can
carry
do
on.
this, right.
But we have several families that still come back to us, to the food pantry or to our FAIR program,
Yep.
where we can provide
Yep.
household items and clothing.
Do people ever come back and volunteer that have been through and to give back?
We have staff that have been familiar with the system, and yes, yeah. It's definitely, I think the most important thing to remember about the Coalition Shelter Program, EA Shelter Program, is that it is a program, and there are expectations when you enter. You just don't come in and hang out.
Right.
You have chores to do, and
Yep.
30% of your time each week is expected to be spent on housing search
Yep.
with the support of a housing specialist.
Yep.
But there are expectations that you fulfill. So that's
Yeah. So that also will help, I would think, getting them back in that pattern of thinking that way.
Right.
That everything has there's a process that every family has to go through for everything that they do.
absolutely. I mean, one of the things that they have to work with their case manager is on a budget, establishing a budget.
Sure.
And most of them, they just don't quite get that.
Yeah.
So so it's how do you live within a budget?
Yeah.
And that's where the education program, we have an education program that is parenting, personal health, finance, personal finance. How do you go on an appointment to go and look at an apartment?
Yeah. Right.
How do you dress? How do you get a job?
Right.
We have a great a curriculum for how to get a job. And then we bring in a yoga teacher. So there's that other side, and you try to have somebody come in and do paint nights.
Yeah.
So there's the personal enrichment, but there's, again, I go back to, you have to have hope.
Right.
And children
Especially.
understand. Yeah, very often children are pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
It takes a lot for a child to
Yeah.
get really down.
Really down. Yeah.
But I think we work very hard at keeping it upbeat. And the murals on the walls in the living room. I had a student from Boston College that lives in Kingston come in and do the artwork, and each living room has a different mural, and they're good. They're great additions, and
And they add to the ambiance of the room.
right. And what we don't want the shelter a place where you stay. We want the shelter to be a place where your experience is positive, and where you're allowed to become a parent and kind of just get stronger.
Right.
And I think I know we do a good job at it. It's certainly, like everyone, we've had a difficult couple of years.
Right.
There's been challenges that we haven't faced before, but
There's nothing you don't overcome.
no, and I think everybody that we hire or anyone that we bring on site to volunteer, I always preach compassion and social justice are really what we're founded on. It's just, it could be any of us needing an extra hand. And we've certainly seen that in recent times, but everything we do, we have to do out of commitment and compassion.
And you obviously do. And your annual report really is wonderful, because is this available online?
No.
It
should be, though.
It should be,
Yeah.
because it really gives such a broad spectrum of what you do. And my final question, and I said that before, but is, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to have a Plymouth homeless shelter and program? And do you ever, I'm sure you do, but is there any way to identify why people become homeless and stop it before it happens? And I know that's a utopia, but over the years that you've been doing this, are there patterns that you've seen? Are there other things that other people or other groups or organizations or anybody can do to try to help prevent that family from getting off the van?
So I do believe that we live in a state that is making every effort to make that happen. You know, we're all, anybody that's in this sector of work is trying to be more creative about how we can avoid homelessness.
Right.
Housing first, you've probably heard, you know, rather than getting people into programs and things, put them in an apartment.
Yeah.
But you need the apartment.
Right.
So I have families at the shelter that both work, yet for them to save the money to even get into an apartment is difficult.
It's so hard. Yeah.
Minimum wage, that I believe that the housing, the amount of money you'd need to make an hour to be able to afford what would be considered affordable housing is like $33.75, something like that. And so $34 an hour to get into housing. It's just, that's the big problem.
Sure.
So do I see it? It's going to take decades.
Right.
I mean, while I'd like to be out of business, the reality is, I mean, we're looking for new property so that we can have an expanded campus. And we're looking at more of a campus vision where we would have a situation where our families in shelter would, and those that have their own housing but use our services would have accessibility to resources, to state offices, to stores, to doctors' offices.
Everything would be there,
But we have kind of a vision, or I have a vision of shelter, transitional housing, where you'd have oversight, but you'd have your own housing, but with oversight. And then affordable housing that's truly affordable. But also, you'd have the FAIR program, you'd have the food pantry, you'd have access to Walmart, you'd have, not that it would be strictly need-based services, but need-based services that would blend into a housing, light retail environment.
Right.
Because if anything, I think people now have recognized that we can talk about these things, and we want to talk about it, but we want solutions.
Right.
And
one thing is always tied to another.
I have a meeting in 2 weeks with the Marshfield group that is really looking to develop some more, flesh out some new ideas.
Sure.
How can we all help each other? How can we start finding some housing solutions and just increased basic needs support that not for those people that we consider living in poverty necessarily, but for those people who have the need.
Right.
And we need to change our language.
Yeah.
We need to change
and
our language.
the stigma.
Yeah.
Because there is a huge stigma about a homeless person.
Exactly.
And a lot of look down on that.
Yes.
It's awful because I don't think anybody asks to be homeless. I don't think anybody grows up saying, "Boy, that's what I want to be."
No, they don't. And again, I'll go back to the community and the community responsiveness. We have a client that needed a job. He's two children. The children's mother and himself, so they've got the family unit, they need a job. So we were able to find a business in the area that was willing to give him a job and actually come and pick him up at the shelter and then bring him back at night. They needed the employees. We know we're all struggling for employees.
Right.
They needed the employees. Right. He needed a job. What a great creative way of making things happen. And he walked taller.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He came home a much more steady guy. Those I love that story too, because
And that's community.
yeah.
And that's what we have here. We are very blessed to live in a community where people really do care for each other and watch out for each other.
Yeah.
And people like you are just, there are no words, Sue, for what you do and how many wonderful things you've done for so many families over the years. Just
given the opportunity, you know, I've been grateful to have the opportunity to be at the coalition and just to be able to give back to the community. And
well, thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And
I appreciate it.
People can go to the website and really find out how they can help too.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now things are opening up,
Yeah.
and we're getting to a better place that way. So.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today and
Thank you
educating
very
us.
much. Yeah, well,
Appreciate
like
it.
I said, I could talk forever. So.
I know.
Thank you for having me. I
Okay,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
You bet.
Thank you. Learn more about how you can help by visiting PlymouthAreaCoalition.org.
If you've enjoyed this video by The Local Scene, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.